Marhaban, ahlan wa sahlan bikum. It's me, Simone, and welcome to our movie reviews. I'm here with my beautiful Zawjti. Say hi, boo.
Hi everyone, it's me Akdeniz and I'm from Turkey.
Yes, yes. And Ana min al Wilayat al Mutahida al Marakia. I hope I said that right. But this is episode 56 of Simon and Acting Movie Reviews. And today we are going to Lubnan to talk about the 2021 film Death of a Virgin and the Sin of Not Living. This has been on my list for a while, like for months now. And I'm finally glad that we're getting to watch it and talk about it. Usually, before we do these reviews, I like to watch the movies twice, at least recently, so I can catch things I didn't know before or see before. But I only got to watch it once because the internet cut out. But I watched it last night, thoroughly enjoyed it. Acty, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. It kind of like gave me the vibes of Nuri Bilge Ceylan, like the
Hmm.
Turkish director that we watched a couple of times,
Hmm.
because I thought it was philosophical and sort of like very in tune with the people, telling like stories of ordinary people
Hmm.
in countries like Turkey or like Lebanon, like third world countries.
Hmm.
So yeah, in that sense, like I really enjoyed it, and it was like an easy watch as well. Though it was philosophical, it wasn't like hard to follow like Nuri Bilge Ceylan's movies.
Hmm. Yeah. In Nuri's films, the conversations are very long and much deeper in philosophy and in wording. But this one has a lot of philosophical overtones and existentialism within it, but without going too deep in the wording and making it overly complicated. That's the beautiful thing about it. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah, that's why like I was watching it today like at 6 a.m. I woke up to watch it, and yeah, it wasn't like I was still very much able to understand, and it didn't like drive me to sleep.
Hmm.
So I can say I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now, I thoroughly enjoyed it, though there is a bit of melodrama within it. Now, there are parts of this film that I feel like were a bit overdone, in making it seem like, it was very emotional and very deep. I felt like there were parts of it that were fake deep, if that makes sense. And they sort of did too much, especially with the inner monologues of characters sometimes. But how did you feel about that? Because there were moments I was like, oh no, another another deep inner monologue about how life is horrible and you're not really who you say you are. I don't know. What did you think?
I mean, I think I liked every inner monologue, and I wanted more, and I enjoyed those like inner monologues, and they weren't necessarily like telling a dramatic, sad life.
Yeah.
Some like I think there were one or two that were like good or okay,
Hmm.
but it's like also life. In life, no one's life is just like going up and always positive and
Hmm.
always good.
Hmm. Hmm.
And also like being from Turkey as well, yeah, like a lot of people do end up in situations that they didn't dream about.
Hmm.
Or yeah, so I could relate to that, and I like those scenes, and I like also like sort of artistic scenes with the sea, those long scenes, because it was poetic and not like too much literature and just heavy wording. It was
Hmm.
just like simple and poetic.
Yeah, it's a gentle film. It's a moving film. There are parts that make you laugh that really could even make you cry if you think about it. If one of those stories touch you, I want to give a little background on myself for anybody who's listening. So I'm Muslim and I moved to Tunisia in like 2017 and then lived there until like 2020 when COVID happened. I had a deep love for the Arabic language. I'm not a practicing Muslim right now, but I still identify as such. I spent a lot of time deep in the Arab culture of North Africa in Tunisia, and I do have a sort of like love hate relationship with the culture of the Arabs because on one hand there are so many qualities about the Arabs that I find appealing and fascinating and worth taking, if that makes sense. But then there are other parts that are just really, really toxic, like their masculinity, like the racism, like the sexism that permeates throughout the Arab world. And it's such a love hate relationship for me. And I really wish that Mad Villainy was here, the guy who's been suggesting so many of our previous films, because he has, so I guess, like negative views related towards the modern discussion on masculinity and femininity and the relationships between men and women. But I feel like this film is such a good example of what a masculinity unchecked looks like. Masculinity in its traditional form, what we would describe as toxic masculinity today. This is what it looks like when it's just allowed to flourish and bloom, and you see how it eats away at people inside. So yeah, I just wanted to give that background on myself for anybody who's listening. Actor, you want to add on anything?
No, I mean, I do agree with you. And toxic masculinity, or this type of masculinity that's portrayed in this movie, is like not only harmful for women. It's almost more harmful for men, because they also have to like deal with certain stresses of it,
Mhm.
and it comes with certain traumas. And we will talk about it more, so I'm not going to go into detail.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
just, one more thing I have to say, this film brings back so many memories of me being in Tunisia, being broke, having those long discussions with my Arab friends and stuff like that. So, this film like touched me in a certain way, but it also reminded me, God, these people love to complain. My God, Jesus Christ. You'll never hear complaining and bitching until you sit down with an Arab man at a cafe for a good 4 hours. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, immediately when it was mentioned like what the young guys were going to do, yeah, I also immediately related to Turkey, because we have the same culture.
Hmm.
Same thing happens in Turkey, where young boys do the same thing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like at all weird for me or anything. And I remember like the stories some of my friends told me and how they
Mhm.
experienced the same things. But of course, they didn't tell it as a trauma.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, let's go over the film. So, the movie opens up with a poem from Khalil Gibran, who is one of the most, if not the most, famous Arab poets in the modern era. Not talking about the guys from 700 years ago. And basically, I'm not going to read the whole poem, but the poem is talking about I have a heart inside that's small and hollow. I wish I could take it out and look into its secrets deeply, but don't get mad at me for holding things inside of my chest because I'd rather keep this heart in a cage than to let it out and hurt you. And then the next scene is like the narrator of this film, but one of many narrators. The main character, his name is Entian, and he's talking about this dream where he's underwater and he is drowning and slowly, getting losing his life as the water continues to wash over him. What did you think about, the opening poem and that scene, if anything?
I mean, I always like a good, literary philosophical entry with a poem or a quote. It's always good, but because it makes you think.
Hmm.
And yeah, the dream it started like a bit artistic, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit like judgmental, and I was like, oh god, like is this gonna be like those long, very sort of depressing films that nothing happens?
Mm.
So I did think of that a little bit, but also like the way the guy was narrating the story, it wasn't boring. So I was also a bit hopeful as well.
Yeah,
What did you
yeah,
think?
yeah. Going into this film, I had no like preconceptions, but that cultural awareness, knowing how in the Arab world and in a lot of the Muslim world, there is a lot of burying of the self. So I thought, Khalil Gibran's poem was definitely related to the idea of being buried underwater, right? Like, think about if you're buried underwater, what can you do? You could swim upward, right? But what if you don't know how to swim? Right? You can't get the air unless you know how to go up for the air. But if you're living in a society where you're not allowed to learn how to get above the things that are burying you, you're going to eventually drown under it. So that's what I was thinking. Like just the awareness that maybe this film is going in the direction of like people are not allowed to, rise above what is holding them down. If that makes sense. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Like, we've also talked about this in, in, a Turkish movie as well.
Hmm.
It is really important what the society like allows you to do,
Yeah.
because like then how else are you supposed to achieve your dreams if nobody's like actually seeing the potential in you?
Yeah.
And yeah, there was definitely like that sort of sentiment throughout the movie as well.
Hmm. Hmm. So yeah, moving forward in the story, the next scene is that the dream fades away, and then we're introduced to the character Entian, and he's sitting in his bed with his friend, watching porn on a cell phone, where they're splitting the headphones together. And his friend is like, "Look, she's about to ride it and stuff like that, and look, she's about to do that position." And Entian is sort of just sitting there with a cold face. And they get dressed, they put on cologne, and they're both talking. And they both say that they're going to see a prostitute later, right? That's the plan for today. Entian and his friend leave the room after they get dressed, and Entian's mom is like, "Oh, come and eat. I made all this food." Of course, Arab woman cooking all day. And he's like, "No, I'm not hungry, mom. I'm going to the movies with my friend." And she's like, "Don't take those small buses. It's dangerous, whatever." And Entian and his friend leave after lying that they're going to a movie. Then the mom has an inner monologue about her life, and her inner monologue is like, this small town is too small for these kids as they continue to grow up. And I miss my husband. He died in a plane crash, and I wish that he had done something wrong to me, like slap me once or cheat on me once, so that now that he's gone, I could love him a little bit less. And the mother is also talking about in her mind that she's writing poetry, and sometimes she posts it on Facebook, but she keeps her most secret poems, her most private poems, to herself, and she'll never publish them. Then there's an inner monologue of, I guess, Entian's sister, and she apparently had an abortion, and she feels a lot of guilt because of the abortion, and she's also obsessed with her body, like she has some dysmorphia. So she then gets on like a cycle to try to like exercise, and she's like pushing herself very hard. And yeah, she then says, which is a common thing throughout this film, how she will die. So she says, "I'm going to die when I'm 70 years old after giving birth to two kids, and I'll just be happy that I got to see them live for the rest of their days." And the mother has the same thing, like, "I'm going to die at 86 from a heart attack, and I'll be finally at rest." What did you think about those two parts?
Yeah, I mean, because first we're introduced to the story from Etienne's narration, I thought
Mhm.
he was going to be narrating the whole story. But it was interesting to like hear the mother's, story and the sister's story. And first of all, I don't understand like young guys watching porn together. Like, what's the purpose? I don't know. So you can explain that later, because I've also like heard that from my guy friends when I was like a teenager, and I was always like, that's gross. Like, then do you like jerk off together as well? Like, it doesn't make sense. And but yeah, like coming to the the background and how they will die, which is also like an interesting thing because we're not like we're hearing the inner monologue, but then we're also like hearing how they will die. So it's
Hmm.
also like a fortune, almost like a fortune like thing as well,
Hmm.
which is like very interesting. And you can see like I don't know, all the people are just very multidimensional, and you can see the generation difference between the mother and the daughter here. She's more the daughter is more obsessed with her body, and she had an abortion, and I don't know, like it was just a look into the life of I guess like Arab woman a little bit, or Lebanese woman.
Yeah. As far as watching porn with guys, that's a big violation. I've never done it. I've had people try to turn on porn around me, and I'm like, yo, turn that off. That's wild. Like, because I can't be getting rocked up around some other dude. And as far as the points about, like people dying in their stories, right? Like somebody will say, they look at me and see this, but really I feel like this inside, and I will die when I'm 67, surrounded by family. I thought that was very interesting because I've always thought about if you knew how you would die and when would you die, would you want to know if you had access to that information? So I wanted to ask you that, Acting.
This is a hard question because if I know, then I can like enjoy my life according to that, I guess. Like live my life to the fullest. If I know I'm going to die at 40, then I would want to do everything by 40. But
Hmm.
then it's also impossible to do everything by 40 or even at any age,
Hmm.
because even if you want it or not, some of your dreams get canceled, some of your dreams get delayed.
Hmm.
So yeah, like it's sort of pointless to know when you will die and then act according to it, because then you will always be haunted by that day. So
Hmm.
I guess I wouldn't want to know. What
Yeah.
about you?
It, I think the overwhelming guilt of having a lazy Sunday while the clock is ticking and I know it's ticking would just eat me alive inside. And I think, knowing when you are going to die is going to take away some hope in life because I think what motivates people is a lot of the times the hope for a better tomorrow. But if you know that the clock is ticking, there's really no hope because you cannot try to get past that. So it's hard. But even then, we already know we are all going to die. But it's still like, oh, it's not going to happen yet. It won't happen tomorrow. It won't happen in 10 years, 20 years. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, that's like the hope of life, I guess.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So those monologues were very good. And then going on outside, Entienne meets up with his friends, and basically this film is like super bad, but in the Arab world. It's like, yeah, this is like a Judd Apatow film. So he meets up with his two homies. He meets up with Suleiman Rogan and Eunice Hill outside, and they basically it's like this really fat guy who is like sort of the star of the show. He's in the pink polo. I thought he was the star of this movie. He really took it home. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's like that. I think everyone had like a friend like that. He's that like silly guy who doesn't really care about anything. He
Yeah.
has like very cliche dreams, like
Hmm.
getting married, having kids, having a good job.
Hmm.
And yeah, he's sort of like also a bit egotistic. I don't know, but yeah, I liked him. He was okay.
Yeah, I really felt like he stole the show because his dialogue, his acting, it was just spot on. He really brought his character to life, and I think there's a lot written into his character because who he represents or what he represents in this film. So NTN and his friend that he was with inside his house go outside. They meet up with two other guys, and as they're walking, like they're having a discussion, like, oh, what did you tell your parents? I told them that I was going to go see my auntie. Oh yeah, I told them I'm going to the movies, whatever, whatever. And yeah, as they're walking, NTN like asks his fat friend, how long have you been with your girlfriend? He's like, a year and a half or 2 years or something like that. And NTN asks, have you had sex with her? And this guy's like, huh? What, sex with her? No, I've only kissed her twice. And then NTN says, that's why you're the problem with our country, right? You're the problem with our society. If people like you were more open-minded, we wouldn't have to waste money on prostitutes. But then the fat guy says, I would never marry a non-virgin girl. That's not what I would do. And that's disgusting. She has to be a good girl from a good family and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I thought that was a very interesting part of that discussion. What did you think about that?
Yeah,
Hello? I think your
definitely that
connection is
sort of
breaking.
mindset.
Yeah, your connection is breaking up. You got to repeat that.
Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
I think that sort of mindset is also very like available in Turkey as well. Like it's here in Turkey as well. So that was definitely relatable. And I went back to my teenage years, or the first times I started like experimenting sexually, and there was always that judgment, even if nobody knew what I was doing, if I was making out with a guy or even something more, nobody knew it but me, but I still felt guilty of doing something, even just like making out. And I was like so certain that like it's never going to go further than that because I have to keep certain things. And yeah, also it's one of the reasons why I dislike some things about my culture. Yeah, like guys don't want to marry girls who are not virgins, but then it's okay for them to go to prostitutes or have sex with any other woman, basically.
Hmm.
So it's very unfair. It's double standards, but yeah, it's like what our parents tell us from the beginning.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
also really hard to break that barrier.
Hmm. Yeah, I've always had a conflicting, point of view in my mind about, the pressure to maintain virginity within the Arab world or the Middle Eastern world. Because on one hand, it's born out of toxic masculinity, the idea that women are ours and our daughters are ours, and for men to penetrate them before they are actually owned by another man is some sort of violation or destruction of property to some degree. But then on the other hand, in the Arab world, Middle Eastern world, there is still the sexualization of women, but there is an understanding that women are not just going to be your sexual playthings. And there is a protection in society by men to make sure that women are not just, fucked around on, right? Unless she chooses to do so, right? And it's so, how can I say this? I go back and forth in my mind about, the pros and cons of having that sort of society. But I can just remember for me living in Tunisia, growing up there, well, not growing up there, but being there for a long ass time, I was like, yeah, if I grew up here, it would be one of the hardest things in my life because I couldn't imagine being a horny 15, 16-year-old and I couldn't get no cutty, right? Like it would be impossible unless I'm talking about sticking it in the booty. And I'm surprised no anal talk came up in this whole film. But what do you think about that?
I mean, I think it did, but he said like it was nasty or something.
I don't remember that.
The fat guy.
I don't remember that, but go ahead.
But anyway, I mean, yeah, like, you know, in your head, you try to bend the rules and okay, well, I'll just do anal. Nobody would know. Like, I remember with my friends, we would be talking like, if we did lose our virginity with someone, would our parents take us to the doctor, or when they take us to the doctor, would they ask to check it?
Hmm.
And it's crazy, like, because none of our parents are also like that. And even if that happened, like, you know, why would you be so worried about that? Or why, like, how come that would happen?
Hmm.
You know, that your mom would randomly say, oh, yeah, by the way, like, check her hymen.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's really ridiculous, but it's really like a mental prison. And yeah, it's both bad for like men and women because then also they end up being in relationships or marriages, even
Hmm.
worse, without knowing if they are sexually compatible with a person or without like, you know, knowing if their penis actually
Right, but I
works.
have to ask you
Or
this. As a woman, if you grow up in the West, quote unquote, America, Canada, whatever, you go out on a date with a guy, there is an expectation from him that he could possibly get some cutting that night. You're in the Middle Eastern world, you go on a date with a guy. This guy has the furthest of thinking that he could ever get some cutting that night. It's almost like that will be a million and one chance because the social rules are different and the barriers are different. Which situations are better to be in? Because most of the time, women don't just want men to pursue them with the expectation of sex, right? That expectation of sex is almost gone in the Middle Eastern world. So isn't that a better situation to be in?
I don't know because I don't think so because in like the second version, in the Eastern version, I guess you're sort of like suppressing both of your insight or wants or desires. So why would you like do that? Like it should be like if you don't want to have sex with that person, don't. But if you do want to have sex with him, then do. Like there shouldn't be any sort of like rules against this. And from my own experience, like going on dates in Turkey, men still do expect to have sex with you on the first date. But if you do that, then you're just like an easy woman and you're never like girlfriend material or wife material.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do that, but your name will be like, you know, a whore
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like men are, you know, not expecting it. Of course, like some
But they're
are the
expecting
super
anal, is what you're
conservative
implying.
ones. Yeah, they wouldn't expect to have sex with you if they are also saving themselves for
They're,
marriage.
I think you're not hearing me. Maybe it's the connection. So you're saying they're expecting vaginal penetration or anal penetration?
Both, either one.
Okay, interesting, interesting. But in those cases, I would argue that a lot of women in the Middle Eastern world are not asexual, but sexual desire is so repressed that it is not even seen as something like they're actively trying to pursue. Now, I know you're going to give like your anecdotes, like, no, me and my friends, we were all big, we were all slinging that cat. That's not what I'm trying to imply, but I'm just saying, like, from how it looks on the outside, right? A lot of the times, women are able to repress their sexual desires for some larger goal, and also because of the compliance necessary to fit in and survive in that society and norm. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. And I'm not going to say like we were slanging that cat because maybe we were talking about it, but when it came to action or when it came to our actual relationships, we weren't doing that. We were still like waiting to be chased. And I still do that today. And then I catch myself and then I question myself, like, like, why am I doing this really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm
But
still like, you know,
it,
discovering these
but
ideas that were given by me by the
but it's
society,
different because you're married, right? As a as a single.
even in marriage.
Okay. Okay, yeah, but we're talking about for people in society who are not married and who are trying to navigate relationships and sex in them. But I understand where you're coming from by talking about how that dynamic between us might be influenced by your culture.
Yeah. I mean, it's even harder if you're not married and if you're in a
Hmm.
relationship
Hmm.
or if you're dating.
Right, right. That's for me. It's an unresolved, question in my mind. Because I'm thinking about what would women prefer, but that's still me sort of mansplaining to myself, right? And I'll never be a woman, so I'm not even going to try to answer. But as a woman, your answer is no. Like this sort of society is not better for women, right? With the repressed sexuality and the expectations of virginity, you're saying that's no, right?
Yeah, because it leads to bigger social things as
Hmm.
well,
Right.
you know. So I do not support it. I think like yeah, it should be, you know, free of
Hmm.
judgment, this act, because it is dependent on a person's wants and needs and
Okay.
desires.
Okay. All right. So the guys are walking down the coastline of their small town, heading towards the bus stop or something like that, and then they are stopped or they're cut off by one of their friends who's in a pickup truck. This Lebanese guy with dreads, shirt off, driving his car, living his best hippie lifestyle, smoking big blunts in the front seat with his homie, and he says, "Yeah, man, I'll give you guys a ride." So they all hop in the back of his pickup truck, and then there's another cutaway scene. And this part of the film, I was like, okay. If this happens every time a person is on screen, I'm going to be pissed off. And his story was a bit interesting. He's claustrophobic. He doesn't like to be, around too many people and stuff like that because he starts to get nervous. He's always loved the sea, and that sort of explains why he has this hippie aesthetic and likes to be by the beach. He was molested by his uncle for a few years, and then his uncle died when he was 18. And when he tried to tell his mother said, "Bury that secret with your dead uncle. Don't tell your father, whatever." And then he talks about how he's going to die. I believe he's going to die when he's like 67, alone in a nursing home. And then his his homie in the passenger seat is smoking weed, and he's like, "Yeah, I first had sex with a man when I was like 12 or 16 or something. I don't know. Like, no, I had sex with a man like a few years ago when I was like 24 or something. And he held me after he fucked me. And then I never felt so loved." And I will marry a woman years later and she will think that I'm secretly gay, but I'll try to convince her I'm not. And yeah, eventually I'll just always repress those feelings inside. And then eventually I'll die. What did you think about those two things?
I think, especially speaking from my country, but I would assume that it's the same around the world. Sexual molestation of young men or young, male children are not talked
Hmm.
enough because of their gender. But also, like, it's even hard for little girls to confess this because they're manipulated in such a way by
Hmm.
adults. I think it's even harder for little boys to do
Hmm.
this because they also, even from childhood, they have certain like gender roles that they have to oblige
Hmm.
to.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's definitely very harsh, and it is something that will haunt you forever. And I really thought these two stories were interesting, and also like the gay guy, this is like a bit more common. We know gays exist everywhere around the
Hmm.
world. And unfortunately, in these type of societies, also in Turkey as well, it's very oppressed.
Hmm.
So yeah, most men do not come out, and they end up like marrying a woman, and then I don't know, end up like starting to fuck other dudes when they're 80 or something,
Yeah. That's wild. They need to be
or
like Merc
not
from
even
90
do
Day.
that.
They need to be like Merc from 90 Day Fiance. When I first saw the hippie guy driving the car, he reminded me of two people I know in life. He reminded me of Abdel from Tunisia, the guy who I worked for at his company named Homeschool, because he had dreads. He drove a car just like that, and he used to smoke weed all the time. And man, as soon as I saw that guy, I was like, Abdel's an actor now? That's crazy. And he also reminded me of your friend Boran because like similar, aesthetics, right? And the other guy he was sitting next to, he was like thinking to himself, like, is any of this real? Are we living like in an alien experiment somewhere? I was like, oh my God, those are the exact same high thoughts I have. Like, exactly whenever I get high, I think about weird shit like that. And yeah, as far as the repressed homosexuality is everywhere, especially in the Arab world. Like the stories I've heard from my gay Tunisian friends, like they were sucking off taxi drivers who you would swear were straight, big fat taxi drivers who were sitting down all day too. Gross. I've heard nasty details. But yeah, man, like the repression caused by toxic masculinity is all throughout. That's those two stories. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think like with almost all of the stories, but with these two specifically, because they have to hide a certain part of their identity, right? Like even with the guy who got molested, that is kind of like his trauma and his identity now,
Hmm.
and he didn't get therapy or he didn't get any help about it, so it's stuck to his soul.
Hmm.
And also with the closeted guy, it's kind of like showing us how easy, like how fast life passes by, even when you're like hiding your whole identity,
Hmm.
and how you can like actually as humans endure so many hardships
Yeah.
within you and never tell anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so like insane to think about it, but when we hear it from these like narrations, we're like, okay, this is a story, it's a sad story, but this probably happened to a bunch of other people as well.
Yeah.
And to think that people go through this, and there are like many people that go through the same thing, it's kind of insane how enduring like humans are a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, within us, we have a million stories and a million experiences and thoughts. And I just appreciate that in this film, all those stories, thoughts, and feelings are able to be narrated by the people. Though I feel like it can be a bit overdone, like in the next scene. So as they're in the back of the truck, driving to the bus stop, they're having a conversation, and then they see this hippie guy, it like in a moped type bike, like tuk that's painted very colorfully, and he's dressed up like a hippie clown or something like that. And the guys in the back seat start making fun of him, like calling him a loser and a weirdo and all that sort of stuff. And you know they then start arguing amongst themselves, like, hey, why are you making fun of him? And he's like, he's a weirdo, he's a loser. I don't care if his son died or whatever. And yeah, Etienne then thinks to himself, like, why do we call him crazy? We all have these different things within us. And there's that inner monologue about him. What did you think about that scene?
Yeah, that definitely made me think of like, once again, not to really judge anyone about what they're doing and what kind of lifestyles they're living, because obviously everyone wants to live a wealthy, healthy, happy life,
Hmm.
but not everyone can get it. Not, most people don't get
Hmm.
it. And we try to create our own, lives and realities and
Hmm.
happiness. So it's really unfair to, judge anyone about anything
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
except like if they're not hurting other people. Like if you're not hurting anyone else, then what you do is probably like the best that you think is for
Yeah,
yourself.
I just think about, once again, like this film is so, there's two films going on at the same time. There's the truth, and then there's the show, right? And everybody on the outside that we're seeing is putting on a show. But what we're hearing through those inner monologues is the truth. And so the truth is that all of them have things that if everybody knew about, they would make fun of them for. But when the show is on, hey, let's criticize anybody who falls out of the norm, which is what they do to this guy. And another thing I want to say about this scene, I got to say this film is beautifully shot because they use the natural Mediterranean light so well. Like when you're looking at this film, at least from that very early part during the day, like they let that light bounce off the water and the sea in the background, and it shines so bright so well. It's beautifully shot, especially with these long, shaky camera angles they're using. Go ahead.
I also definitely love like how it is shot as well, and I love it so much that I started watching this movie last night, and then I finished it this morning. And in between, when I was sleeping, I saw a dream that I was in the same setting of this
Yeah,
movie, but like the story was completely different.
yeah.
For some reason, it was me and a bunch of like Arab girls that I met, and there was an alien
Mhm,
invasion. Don't ask me why and how that
mhm,
came, but it was in the same setting, like the hotel
mhm,
setting.
mhm. Yeah, that's funny. So you were trying to survive the alien invasion, or were y'all going together to go fuck the alien?
No, we were trying to survive, and we had like
Uh-huh.
mopeds, and they were like things falling off from the sky, and we were running away. And I was like, I was a tourist there, but I was alone for some
Mhm,
reason, and I met like these Arab
mhm.
girls, and yeah, they tried to show me the way, and we tried to escape.
That's
I don't know
crazy.
why I had a dream
That's
like that.
crazy. But I think because, I lived in Tunisia so long and you come from Marmaris, right? Those Mediterranean sunsets are just something else. Like something hits different about a good Mediterranean afternoon, evening. And so when you see it on screen, you're like, damn, I know that feeling. I know that place, you know?
Yeah, it's so
Very,
peaceful.
very. But I also like in this film how the acting is so well done in the sense that all the elements, if you know some real Arabs, in 1 minute they're like laughing, joking, and then the next minute it's like, Zebbi, fuck your mother, fuck your father, you're a piece of shit, you're a dog. Like the shit talking in this film is absolutely great. And so when the guys get off of the truck and they start walking towards like the store that they need to go to, they realize that they need to get condoms. But then they all get scared about walking inside to pay for condoms. And I felt like I felt that before because like I can remember the first time I tried to buy some rubbers and I just felt so nervous. It's like my heart was pounding through my chest. And low key, I'm gonna keep it real. Like up until I got married, when I was buying rubbers, like I did feel like just a bit odd, you know? I don't know how to explain that feeling, but if you're a man, you know how weird it is to walk up to the counter and say, "Can I get some Magnums, some Trojans, whatever?" You get what I'm saying? But what did you think of that scene when the guys start fighting?
Yeah, I also like that dynamic because I think it also kept the rhythm alive.
Mhm,
So like you didn't get bored of the conversation because there were, cracking jokes. Sometimes you had the serious inner monologues, but then like you had other stuff that are going up and down in terms of like volume as well.
mhm.
So I think that keeps the audience awake as well.
Yeah,
And it is also realistic, like you said, teenage boys are like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when it comes to buying condoms, I think it's even weirder for girls to do
Mm,
that because I remember like I didn't want to buy condoms and I got like a couple of ones from my mom's makeup
mhm,
bag when I was like smaller. And yeah, I also like gave some to my friends as
mhm.
well, just because we didn't want to go in and buy
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And also, yeah, I remember like one time we all like hooked up with a couple of guys together, but we were virgins, so we didn't do anything actually. We just made out with
Mhm.
them. And then we all suspected that we were pregnant, which is crazy. Like it's ridiculous because no penetration happened.
Wow.
And my friends pressured me to like get Plan B, and nobody wanted to get it, so I went in and got it from like a pharmacy. And I just still to this day remember like how the lady looked at
Uh,
me because I went in with my high school
wow.
uniform as well, and she was like looking at me.
Hello,
Can you
are you
hear me?
there? Yeah, go ahead.
She
Go
was
ahead.
looking at me so sad, and yeah, she was just like, "Oh, poor girl. Like, did you get pregnant?" And yeah, that was definitely traumatizing. So it's
That's
a trip.
crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy. See, that goes back to like what I was saying earlier about like the differences in culture, right? Because like the good thing I guess you can say about your society and their strict sexual rules is that you don't have the teenage pregnancy problem. Like growing up in Louisiana, I went to school with girls who were in their third trimester in fourth period, but I'm pretty sure that's unheard of in your world. And yeah, I hate to go back to that debate we had at the beginning, but that's what your story just made me think of. The innocence you're able to maintain in your part of the world.
I mean, there is still teenage pregnancy and also child marriages as well. And the difference in Turkey is that if you do become pregnant, they probably pull you out of school. So
Hmm.
no, you don't see pregnant girls going to high school because they're probably at home.
Hmm.
So yeah, just because like it's different, it doesn't mean they don't exist.
Right,
And
right.
plus, there's like a lot of rape as well. So
Wow.
especially in Turkey,
Yeah.
of younger girls. So yeah, and when that happens, like because of the cultural rules, most of the time people don't get an abortion because their families, don't want to get them.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for putting us on game on what's really going down in Turkey. Okay, but back to the story. There's something that we forgot to mention. So there's four guys here in this film, but they only have enough money to pay for three of them to get in, right? So the guy who arranged the whole thing, he's Entien's friend. He's wearing like the Hawaiian shirt, the blue Hawaiian shirt, and he's actually the guy who's supposed to be the more experienced one, but he's also poor. And this is different than the guy in the pink shirt. I forgot his name, but the fat guy in the pink shirt. He
Jean Paul.
Jean Paul, okay. And so Jean Paul is like more rich. He comes from a better family, more aristocratic background. And there's this conflict always between Etienne's friend and Jean Paul, and the classism between them, because Jean Paul says, Etienne's friend, you're stupid, you're poor, you can't even afford to fuck, and we're about to fuck. And then his friend is like, yeah, but I orchestrated this whole thing together. I'm street smart. I'm better than you. You think you're this and that, but you're really not. What did you think about their conflict and dynamic throughout the film?
Yeah, I think as much as I enjoyed John Paul's like acting, I also thought like Adnan was a bit like of a better person because he defended like the clown guy and things like that. But yeah, like I don't know, it's a guys group, it's conflicting of egos and a little bit of like power, and they were also constantly like talking about how they're gonna, fuck the prostitute lady, and how they're, better than each other in doing so. And it was mostly also like Jean Paul as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was just like fun to see their conflict. But yeah, I think they're not. I thought they're not going to stay friends forever.
Mm. I definitely think the Adnan and John Paul relationship is supposed to highlight the many cultural and social and racial differences within Lebanon, because Adnan is sort of like a dark skinned typical Arab, and Jean Paul is what in a lot of parts of the world would be considered just a white man until they found out he's a swarthy Arab, right? But yeah, in Lebanon they were colonized by the French, and that's why maybe you still have people walking around with French names or surnames and stuff like that. Meanwhile, the Arabs were oppressed and made poor and stuff like that. So I could imagine that maybe them having this back and forth all the time is also signaling to the audience a deeper sort of conflict within Lebanese society. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree, and I think also the thing that comes with their class difference. If you remember, as they were first walking, they do have, or maybe later. I'm not sure about the time, but they do have a discussion of dreams,
Hmm.
and
That's much later,
that's later. Okay,
but go ahead.
but because of maybe his background, Adnan doesn't really have dreams or doesn't dream of anything. And
Hmm.
Jean Paul can dream because he's like, okay, maybe these things can happen. Like, it's okay for me to do those things.
Hmm.
So even with that conversation, you can see sort of how, certain social standards put you in certain mindsets and places and spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think they're friends in the sense that maybe they're brought together by one person. Maybe they're both cool with MTN, or the fourth guy who sort of had no dialogue in this film. Like the fourth guy is just there, the green shirt guy. I really felt like at one point his character was just going to die or get clipped off, or should not have even been there at all. What do you think about him?
I mean, I think, there's always that one silent guy in the group that
Mhm.
just sort of listens to whatever else is saying, whatever, other people are saying and just comments on certain things.
Yeah,
So I didn't mind him being there. I didn't think it was unnecessary because we also heard his story as well later.
yeah, yeah. But the price that they're going to pay to go see the prostitute is 50,000 Lebanese dollars or pounds, whatever. And I converted that to USD today, and that's literally 50 cents today. Now, I don't know what it was a year ago, but damn, this is a poor ass country, man. Like my God, Lebanon. Like their currency has fallen off a cliff. Now there might be a street rate for the U.S. dollar that's different than the official rate, but Jesus Christ, Lebanon has been going through crisis for real, and you can feel the poverty a little bit in this film. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, definitely you can because we don't really see any fancy establishments or
Mhm.
anything like that. Or not even like normal, not fancy, but yeah, I'm scared like Turkey is going to be like that too because we're sort of going that way. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. But afterwards, they go buy the condoms, and then they're going to get some beers and drink. And they go into this store, Etienne and Adnan, and there's a blind guy there. And he says, here's your beers, here's your drinks, whatever. And then they leave, and then he starts playing the drums. And he plays the drums actually very, very well. And this is my favorite scene of the movie. Somebody says in the background, I don't think he's really that blind. I think he can still see or something like that. And as he's playing the drums, the camera then shoots to what he sees, what the blind man sees. And there's only like a sliver of light coming out of like a corner, and we just hear the sounds of the drums. That was one of the best scenes in the film to me. I don't know what you thought about that.
Yeah, that was very interesting, and like the music was really hypnotizing and enchanting, and it definitely like is a melody that I'm used to as well. So I really like that, and I like the fact that they showed what he was seeing, and I thought it was an interesting choice not to narrate him.
Hmm.
Why wasn't he narrated? What happened to his life? And then we were sort of just like left with that.
Hmm.
And I guess maybe it is some sort of message that a lot of people go through our lives. I don't know. We pass through a lot of people, and we don't know their stories most of the time. And they were saying like, why is he so happy anyways? He's blind. And he looked happy, he looked satisfied with his life, he had music.
Hmm.
So yeah, there are actually, I was thinking just like there are actually a lot of things we can learn from just random people, and sometimes the people that have the least.
Right, right. But that's the thing. I felt like what made that scene powerful is that there was no monologue, because it started to get a bit heavy-handed with every 4 or 5 minutes. Somebody has a 2-minute monologue about who they really are and the problems they have. But this guy, probably is playing his music, and all he wants to do is just focus on what little he does have, the light he sees from the outside, and the sounds he can make from his drums. That's how I'm looking at that.
Yeah, yeah, maybe because he has a handicap, he's more realistic than other people
Hmm.
because he is kind of rid of that I don't know, judgment, I guess. because he
Mhm.
can't see anybody looking at him or he can't see anyone else. So
Yeah,
certain things don't matter for him now.
yeah, yeah. Now, moving on, the boys are like drinking beer, walking through the city, trying to make it to the bus stop still. And they find this truck, right? And one of the guys, the green shirt guy, gets into the truck. He starts playing with the wheel while the other guys like climb over the truck. And then we hear his monologue, right? He says, "The only regret I have in life is like I didn't learn how to ski." And it says, "A few years from now, my father will get into a truck crash and be paralyzed from the neck down. Then my parents will pressure me to get married. I'll marry some nice girl. We'll learn to love each other. And then I'll start driving trucks and eventually have a heart attack and die." And there were parts of this film that made me feel like, this is like, how at the ending credits of films, they're like, Johnny went on to become a successful businessman until he crashed his plane in Colorado. It was like, it started to get a bit overwhelming. Like, maybe that guy's story was a bit touching, right? But it was still just like, come on, come on. I don't know. What did you think?
I mean, I think his story was one of the most ordinary ones.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it's very common also in Turkey to get like arranged marriage and then you fall in love with the person later on and things like that. Like even my grandmother was like that. And yeah, it was I guess sort of saying there are just like regular stories as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
not everyone's life is super duper tragic. You know,
Right.
some people want simple things like teaching their children how to ski.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. The thing is, like, after watching this film, you can't help but for the rest of the day start narrating your own life. I don't know if you started doing this too. Like, I was watching this film at a cafe because there was no internet at the house, and as I was walking home, I was like, I've always wanted to become a philosopher, but I thought nobody would understand. I ended up marrying the girl of my dreams, but I've always thought about what if I was somebody's girl of their dreams? what should
You're silly.
what should life be like for me? I'm gonna die at 78, hunched over a toilet, shitting out a pizza I should not have eaten. I don't know if you started thinking like that for the rest of
I didn't start to narrate my own life, but I definitely thought about my dreams
hmm
and whether if I would accomplish them and also like how might I die.
Yeah,
And those
yeah.
were the two things I was thinking about, but I didn't really come to a conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. I could I think that's one of the great things about this film. Like it does make you think about death, and I think we should think about death more often. But it is such a taboo topic. And before we turned on this live stream, we were watching an interview with the director of this film, and he was very candid and honest about the themes and messages in this movie, which was very refreshing because I hate when directors say, I just want people to watch it, enjoy it, and take what they want from it. Like he was like, no, this film is about how this society is smothering us as men, and how we need to break out and be able to rise above all the stuff that's drowning us, and things like that. What did you think about like the director's bluntness on talking about this film and its messages and themes?
I thought he was very honest and courageous because these are the things that we don't really talk about, or even if we do talk about, we're sort of shut down.
Hmm.
And it's also like part of therapy as well, that you're supposed to sort of accept what the patient is giving you and not to be like, oh, you lived through that, forget about this, just be positive. You
Hmm.
can't really say that to people, and we're sort of expected to be that way. We're always expected to be strong, get over any challenge that life throws at us. We're
Hmm.
supposed to be constantly earning money and worrying about our health, our wealth, and our romantic relationships. Like sometimes it does feel like there isn't a moment to take a breath in life because even if you're not physically doing something, you're still mentally always thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
And it does become very tiring. And then people tell, "Oh, just meditate,
Hmm.
just I don't know, go on a hike and things like that." And yeah, those things help, but there is a burden that comes from just being alive in this world.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just really thought that that topic was very interesting, and I really liked how also he took something that he experienced himself
Hmm.
when he was younger and put that something personal there as well.
You got to explain that for the people.
Okay, okay, so yeah, he was thrown into a situation that described,
Hello,
you
are
know,
you there? Your connection stopped.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
He was thrown in a situation where he had to be with a prostitute when he was younger for the first time, I think, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, so this was very similar to what he lived when
Hmm.
he was younger, and that's why he also wanted to express this. And he wrote this like script when he was 24 or something.
Hmm.
And that is also a very young age to realize that,
Yeah.
and also be healthy enough to share this trauma with the world.
Yeah, I think that's why this film is so authentic and real because each of those inner monologues sounds like a real ass story, just as real as the main story of going to see a prostitute and it being an awkward experience for the first time you lose your virginity. So I think that's why each of those stories was so detailed and why they were in there because with everybody's individual story, you can relate it to your own life. And if not your life, somebody else can relate it to theirs. Like, oh yeah, my father died in a car crash, or yeah, my sister had an abortion. You can always find parallels, and that's what makes this film so relatable. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I wanted to say about the director's interview.
Yeah. But moving forward in the film, John Paul almost gets hit by a car. We don't exactly see him almost get hit by a car, but he, says, "Oh, guys, I was almost about to die," and the other guys just sort of laugh at him as he, is crying out for help or sympathy for getting his fat ass hit by a car. And then, he's like, "No, seriously," and they're like, "Oh, well, we're gonna come to your funeral and mourn you, John Paul." And he says, like, "Fuck you guys and you stupid dumb nigga." I was like, "Zanji Zaber." I was like, "Okay." How come in every film we're watching recently, actually, every film we're watching, there's always like a racial slur against black people in it out of nowhere? Like I am enjoying this film, having a good ass time, and then a racial slur has to drop. Why, actually? Why?
Well, we watched Russians and Arabs.
Exactly.
So,
Okay.
I mean, not to say that, Turkish people also are racist or use racial slurs as well. So,
Mm.
not to blame them specifically, but yeah.
Yeah, it was just out of nowhere. But anyway, John Paul dies after that, and everybody celebrates, and we're happy. And that's the end of
No,
the
that's
film.
not what happened.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead. Continue in the story.
Okay, yeah. So basically, they take the bus to where they're going, and there's a scene in the bus where first they're having like a conversation again between each other, and I think there's a conversation about money. Adnan is asking John Paul for money, and John Paul is like, "I don't have it." And then we go to the inner monologue of the main character Etienne as well, and he's sort of like examining the people on the bus, and there's like a guy sitting there, and he's saying all these people they're goners and goners. I don't know.
Okay.
And yeah, they're basically like, they're just living through life. They don't, they couldn't accomplish what they wanted to. And then he sees a kid and he thinks like, you're not going to be the colors that you are seeing right now is going to get duller. Life is not going to be as you imagined. And she's with her grandmother. And, we learned how her grandmother is going to die and she's going to find her grandmother dead. And then years later, she's going to die like in a similar way with her grandmother. And then there's a guy with one eye. He describes him as well. I don't exactly remember what he says about that guy, but basically he lost his eye, and then after that he was known as the guy with the one eye, and no one looked past it. And yeah, and then we go back into like their conversation. I don't exactly remember what they talked about. Do you?
Yeah, basically they get on the bus and Adnan and Jean Paul are arguing about money because Adnan is not going to sleep with the prostitute when they go there, so he's asking him to buy him another beer. But Jean Paul is like, "I'm not going to buy you a beer. You broke sob. Like you should be able to have money." And then they start going back and forth, dissing each other about who's an asshole, right? And the Arabs are so vicious when they diss each other. Like, oh my god! Like Jean Paul says to Adnan, "Your house is a madhouse, right?" Like just oh my god, it was so cutthroat. Like how he was like cutting down Adnan. I felt bad for him low key, but he had to sit there and take it. He had to take that roasting. And this part of the film made me think about the alienation caused by capitalism because Etienne is sitting in the front seat or sitting in the back seat and looking at the guy who is going to protect the houses of millionaires, and that causes him not to be able to get a good sleep at night because I guess he works the late night shift. And yeah, it just made me think about how we're in elevators with other people who are going to work and on buses with other people who are going to work, and we don't say a word to them, even though they're the most like us in the world, right? So yeah, it just made me think about that, and it also made me think maybe Etienne is projecting all of these stories onto other people because how do you know what the little girl's when the little girl's grandmother is going to die, and how do you know that this guy lost his eye in an airsoft gun fight? Like we're supposed to suspend belief and believe Etienne is God and knows everything about everybody, right? Maybe life isn't also bad for these people, and Etienne is just writing stories for them because he wants to be a writer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that part is sort of unclear whether like these stories are real or not because also for himself, is it real? Like how because how could he know what age he would die or what age his mother would die, et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm-hmm.
we just sort of like have to accept this sort of like higher power of narration came to Etienne.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, about like the security guard and capitalism and all sorts of things. In that scene, I was thinking how we unconsciously or consciously, but without power, enable certain things to happen
Mm-hmm.
in our world and certain powers to take over. And that's what I was thinking in that scene because yeah, that guy like has probably don't have any other option but to work for the billionaire
Mm-hmm.
as a security guy. But actually, the billionaire is one of the reasons why he's in the system as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And going on from there, from this scene, they get off of the bus, and what happens next? No,
Yeah,
there's a scene. Oh, sorry, there was a scene when they were like holding their breath through the tunnel. I don't know if that's really worth building on, right?
I think that just like I don't know puts a little point of how still childish they are. By the
Mm.
way, how old do you think they are?
I would say they're all late teens, early 20s,
Yeah, like
late
18 or 19.
19 to maybe 21.
Yeah, yeah. I
Because
was thinking the same.
when the prostitute sees them, she says no more kids. So even though they are hella hairy and got beards and stubble, those are Arab kids. An Arab teen looks like at least a 45-year-old man.
Yeah. Anyway,
My jokes are not
yeah.
landing. My jokes are not landing. Go ahead.
So I think after that they're walking to like where they will be getting the
Oh,
prostitute.
wait. But the last thing in that bus scene, when they get off of the bus, this is the one time the camera doesn't follow them, but the camera stays in the bus, and there's a hearse following them. What did you think of the hearse following the bus?
What is a hearse?
Okay, all right. A
I don't
hearse
know.
is a car that carries dead people to a funeral. It's a
Oh,
long black car. You didn't notice that?
I did not.
Wow.
But now that you said it, I mean, it kind of goes back to what Etienne was saying in the bus or what he was philosophizing about. Sort of like all these people, they're they don't really have purposes, or they're just like living their life as it comes by, and then everyone is going to die eventually, and no one could stop that or help that.
Yeah, there was a, and also in that same scene, they start turning up the Arab party music that John Paul was dancing to because he loves that song. But then when they get off of the bus, the music turns up even louder, but death is always around them. I felt like, yeah, it's symbolizing their, these guys are living, this guy moment right now, very jovial and happy, but death is always right behind us, or it's right around the corner.
Yeah, and
So
especially when you're young, you never think you're going to die.
yeah, but it's ever present, which made me think, okay, is somebody going to die at the end of this film? I know the film is titled Death of a Virgin, but I thought it might just mean death of his virginity, but not actually of the person. So that was a bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, go ahead and continue.
So yeah, they're basically walking towards where they are going to get the prostitute, and there's a conversation that happens there. First, like the guy who doesn't really talk a lot, he tells about his dream that he dreamt of the prostitute, and he saw like big tits, black eyes, black hair, a big booty, like I don't know, Arab girl, and he was describing that. And then also after that, Etienne says like, "Oh, I had this dream where I was drowning," etc., etc. And then also there, Jean Paul tries to like light up a cigar. He's
Mhm.
so funny. And yeah, and then like the other guy Adnan like takes it off his mouth and throws it away and says like, what are you doing, like stop being embarrassing, and all sorts of things. And he almost finds like, I guess, Adnan's wealth, sorry, Jean Paul's wealth, embarrassing a little bit maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then they remember that they have to spray eros, which is like the spray for them to spray on their dicks so that they don't come early. um but yeah, and they start doing that, which is, I never heard of that before. I heard of the pill, but I've never heard of spray.
Mhm.
Anyway, they do that, and then they hear like a gunshot or something, or they see a gun, and I don't know. Adnan starts running away, and then we hear about Adnan's story or narration that like he will slowly turn into an alcoholic, and then he will be like become addicted, and then his mother will die, and his mother will tell him like don't throw your life away, but he will eventually at 36 start drinking again. And he's not gonna do anything really. He's gonna avoid responsibility. He's gonna abuse substances, and then eventually he will die from an overdose. And that's when they arrive to the prostitution house.
Right, right. Yeah, as far as Adnan's story, I felt like the last line he said, like, life is never about making something out of it. It's just about living. Like, Adnan is just sort of, going through the experience of life with no care, nihilistically, about what the outcome will be. And maybe his ultimate thing is just having pleasure, right? Adnan didn't talk about, like, any sort of, like, abuse or anything like that. But it seems like he's just sort of numb to life, maybe because of the poverty he grew up in. What do you think?
Yeah, this reminds me of like a little certain sentences in Turkish language, because when someone asks how are you doing, there are just like a lot of phrases that sort of says, I'm just like going through with life.
Hmm.
Like we can answer saying, what can I do? Like, what can I do? What are you doing? What can I do? Just like same old, same old.
Hmm.
And there is just like a lot of phrases like that, and it sort of like reminds me, you know wherever life takes us, we sort of go in that direction, and
Yeah.
there are few people that actually take direction of their lives.
Hmm.
And even if you do that, you're still somewhat dependent on where life will take you.
Hmm. Yeah, you're just sort of riding the wave, going with the flow, and
Yeah.
there's not much
and
you can do.
and if like the flow is a tsunami, or you have like no waves at all, then like what are you supposed to do?
Well, try to row your boat.
Yeah, well, not everyone has the same sort of personality to keep on rowing.
Yeah, yeah. It also made me think, like, in this film, because of how different everybody's outcomes are a little bit. It made me think, like, okay, is this group of guys, like, each one comes from like a different segment of Lebanese society, or are they all sort of at the lower class of society, right? And I'm more prone to think it's like the first one because John Paul comes from a rich family, but Etienne and the other three guys seem to be sort of at the lower class. So I don't know exactly because, like, these guys have. He ends up becoming a truck driver. Etienne ends up getting like a good job, I guess, but the other guy becomes a drug addict. What do you think?
This sort of reminds me of my group in middle school, because we all used to live in like the same site, but we all ended up becoming different people. Like one of my friends there, got diabetes, got like diagnosed with diabetes, and then he ended up like staying and living with his family, while one of them moved to the States and is now like has his own like garage sort of place. I moved to Budapest. I got married so early, and I don't know. One of them sort of became like an emo girl.
Hmm.
One of them became a dietitian. Like it's kind of wild how life took us so many different places.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I don't know. I guess when you're like younger, it's easier for you to connect and forget about your personal troubles, but it gets harder as you get older as well. I don't know. What do you think?
Um, yeah, I mean, this film makes you think about your friends and those moments you've had and how things changed. I don't know. I just feel like this film is supposed to say, okay, there's different parts of our society. Let's try to represent them with each individual person. And it's just so often in life, if you're born poor, most likely you'll die poor. If you come from a family of drug addicts, that's a likely outcome for you. You get what I'm saying? So one of their friends fell into that, but the other three sort of changed course and had different outcomes. But yeah, that's all I got to say.
Yeah, I don't know, because like again, like thinking about myself, that friend that had diabetes, he was the poorest of us all, and he
Hmm.
was like the son of the doorkeeper.
Mm.
But he was also like when we were little, he was also like the main guy of our friend group. Like
Mm.
everybody listened to him. He was older, and I don't know, no one else would go out if he didn't come out,
Hmm.
and things like that. And he was like the most sensible person. But then now looking at it, I feel like he has like the sort of most average life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, moving on in the story, the guys make it to the whorehouse where the prostitute is, and they're met by the contact that Adnan has. It's an older woman. She says, "Hey, you said that there were going to be only three guys," and Adnan's like, "Yeah, it's just three. I'm not going." And so the woman tries to call the prostitute, but she's not ready. So she says, come back in like an hour and a half when she's, back here. And they're like, okay. And as they're walking away, she gives her monologue where she basically talks about, she had a son with cerebral palsy, and eventually he was taken away from her, and she was locked up in jail for, drug distribution or something like that. And when she gets out of jail, she doesn't try to get her son back, and she just wants to continue to, live this lifestyle because she doesn't feel worthy of having a child, I assume. And the other guys, as they're walking away, John Paul says to Adnan, she has a weird accent. Where she's from? And he's like, Adnan says she's from Russia, and then John Paul gets a hard on. He's like, "Oh yeah, let me fuck her. I want to fuck a Russian." And Adnan is like, "Bro, she's like 60 years old. Like, you are gross," and she doesn't want it. And so then John Paul says, like, "How can she just be selling pussy out here all in the open, broad daylight?" And Adnan is like, her clients are like high level people in government. She has connections, so she's protected. And I think that goes to show like Adnan is street smart, and John Paul might be rich, but he doesn't know what the hell is going on. He just likes to run his mouth. So then the guys decide to go get some beers and then go to the beach. What do you think about that monologue from the Russian woman, if she is Russian, and Adnan and John Paul?
Yeah, it was another sad story, I guess. Like I don't know what can I add to it. I guess you again see how like people end up in those sort of situations and how life, gives them certain options to do something, and
Mm-hmm.
then people most of the time take the easy way, which is like the easy way to make money most of the
Mm-hmm.
time. So yeah, not like the easy way when it comes to your honor, your respectability, your psychology, your mental health. Those are all sacrificed when it comes to earning the most money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I thought when I listened to her story. And yeah, when he was saying like, oh, he's she has clients in high places, that felt such like a bullshit. It's like it just felt regular, young men bullshit a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was funny.
Yeah, like Adnan is just making up excuses as he goes.
Yeah, like he only been there like one time, I assume,
Yeah, I
before.
think I think there was a line when Adnan said like, "Yeah, I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm just pretending." I think he actually said that during his monologue.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I think he was just like, selling the experience to his friends because
Mm-hmm.
he experienced it, so he wants his friends to experience it. And
But
it's like
that's
a special moment of losing your virginity.
Yeah, and that's all Adnan has because he doesn't have money. He doesn't have standing, so he has to be the street guy. He has to be the guy who knows what's going on outside and how to navigate. So
Yeah.
that's how he's cool amongst them. Unlike the green shirt guy who was just there. Like imagine being the guy in the friend group who was just there.
Yeah, he's like, he never buys drugs, but if someone passes him a joint, then he smokes it.
Hey,
He's sort of like that. And I guess like the only reason he came for the prostitute is because he didn't want to be left out.
yeah. He's like, all right, guys, I guess I'm coming. All right. But
Yeah.
anyway, they go to this beach bar club sort of thing, but like basically the outskirts of like a hotel where there's a swimming pool, but also the beach. And the guys are looking across the pool at two white girls who are sunbathing. And John Paul is like, he can't get over himself. He is like, my God, they're so beautiful. These beautiful white snow bunnies across the way. What I would do just to be able to lick her pale skin. And Adnan is like, haven't you guys heard the old Arab expression? He who does not love a blonde does not love the beauty of life. And the two guys are like clapping hands over how much they worship the white man. And then they go to the bar and they're trying to order drinks, but the guy behind the bar is a bit effeminate, like a bit, lispy in how he answers the question. And as they're walking away, Jean Paul starts laughing, like, "Can you believe that guy? He's so gay. Look at him. He's gay, gay." And then they go to the beach, and John Paul is asking them to like take pictures of him on the beach after like he tells his story of what he wants in life. He wants to marry a good, Lebanese girl from a good family. They're gonna have three sons, and he's gonna have an expensive desk, and people will have to make appointments to talk to him. And then the camera sort of freezes and zooms up into his face, and we find out what actually happens to John Paul. He ends up taking a $90,000 bank loan for a wedding. Jesus Christ, $90,000 for a wedding. Actually, is that normal in Turkey?
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
God.
I know you had it easy. I'm telling you. If I was like a very traditional Turkish girl, you would be like paying your debt for a good 10 years.
That makes no sense. $90,000 for a wedding. Anyway, he got a bank loan for 90K for a wedding. He ended up marrying the girl that he's dating right now. They end up having two daughters. He ends up becoming a lawyer with his dad's friend, and eventually like gets sick and dies and leaves his wife in $50,000 worth of debt and two daughters without a father. And yeah, what did you think about those scenes? The pool, the gay guy, and the John Paul story.
The pool scene, like where they're talking about the girls, that's so relatably like Turkish as well. Turkish men love blondes. They love Russians as well because it's different. And like you'll see blonde girls in Turkey, but they're very minimal, and also like most of them are also fake blondes. So if you're looking at like a natural blonde, it's like a goddess. And yeah, I definitely felt that throughout like my teenage years as well. Especially my best friend is a blonde, so yeah, immediately like when people met us, they would ask her, are you actually from Turkey? Like where are your grandpas from? Um, but yeah, I mean the gay guy, we sort of knew John Paul is kind of like that type of person, but I like the fact that Etienne was sort of defending the guy and saying like, if it doesn't touch me, then I don't care. Like he can do whatever. Why are you blaming him? And yeah, I think Jean Paul had a good life to a
You think John
degree.
Paul had a good life? Hell no.
I mean, he was just paying off like money debt, but other than that, like I don't know. He didn't like get involved in drugs or anything. He was just like so stressed out.
Yeah,
But I
but
really like the scene how he did it. Like it stopped and like
no,
it got closer.
there were some things that I skipped out on. John Paul secretly, deep down inside, wants to be an actor. And he said, I'll try to go to acting auditions every now and then, but I'll never get the part. And the best part of his life is dressing up like Santa Claus on Christmas for his kids. And he keeps doing that until they no longer believe in Santa Claus. And then he stresses himself so much with work and paying off his debt, he ends up getting clinical depression, then a disease, and dying early. That doesn't sound like a good life, low key.
I mean, yeah, maybe it's not that good of a life, but I feel like it's a very common sort of life.
All right, actually, if I died at 47 because I had crippling depression and I'm trying to pay off debts, you would be like, oh, Simon lived a good life.
No, no. I mean, depression is very shitty. Yes, it's not a good life. But for example, I think it sounds better than Adnan's life. That's what I meant. I was like, I should have said relatively.
Mm.
But if you have depression, I will know. I will notice it. Don't worry.
How? How?
What do
You
you mean
wouldn't know.
how? I will be a psychologist. I will see the signs.
Mm. Okay, okay. What if I've had it this entire time and you didn't know?
Well, I'm not a psychologist yet.
Oh, sorry, guys. As soon as I get the paper, the third eye opens.
Well, do you think you have depression?
No, I've never been depressed. I've been suicidal and not depressed. I just wanted to end this, but I never wanted to. I never said, oh, woe is me. But I've definitely thought about killing myself, but I don't know if that makes me depressed.
It doesn't. I mean, it makes you suicidal, not depressed. But most of the time, they come hand in hand. So that's why we think, you know, it might be that way. But don't
Speaking
say
of,
that.
speaking
That
of,
scares me. Even
no,
hearing you say that.
no, no. But you've never, I don't know, man. I put that barrel to my head. I've looked at the ledge. I've done some wild stuff. But speaking of that, how come nobody in this film ended up committing suicide? What do you think
Mm,
about that? There wasn't a single person, except, well, we're going to get to that. Somebody tried to do it, but there never is a story of like somebody, taking that.
yeah. I think there could be some religious aspect of it because it is in Islam. It is like forbidden, and I think also in Christianity as well.
Every religion.
And yeah, in every religion. So I think it might be like also culturally taboo as well.
I think, this film did go through censorship, as the director said, and they did take out the curse words. The director said, like, the government will only allow you to have two curse words every scene, which I feel like there's way more, but I guess the N word is not a curse word to them. So, but yeah, maybe they edited out any mention of suicide. What do you think?
Or maybe they might have edited out, but I mean, they edit that out in Turkish TV. So I might be expecting that they edit out in Lebanese TV as well.
Hmm.
But I think it also might have to do with this sort of like unchecked masculinity in the
Hmm.
movie because if you do commit suicide, it's like you're pussy. Like
Yeah.
you ran away from life, but if you go all the way, even if you're in a really shitty situation, you at least tried
Hmm.
to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you died of circumstances. For example, for John Paul, he didn't commit suicide. He tried to pay his debt until he died.
Hmm. Hmm.
So maybe that's why as well.
Maybe, maybe. But I thought John Paul's close-up scene was very, very well done, and I like that because it sort of like centers the story around him. Because I feel like he is the star here, and even if he's not the main character, a lot of the big themes center around him because he exhibits the most of the worst of this society and everything that they're trying to challenge. And I think by saying his story, where he doesn't end up with the three sons, he doesn't end up rich and balling and living a long ass life. It goes to show all the negative things in that society that people think are masculine ended up eating him inside because he couldn't be real.
Yeah, definitely. And he does have like, he's one of the people that tried the hardest to, create that persona for
Hmm.
other people. Like he's masculine, he's sexually really good,
Hmm.
and he's rich, he's gonna be rich, he has a girlfriend. Like on the surface level, it looks like he has it all.
Yeah, yeah. Then we find out Etienne's story. So Etienne's monologue finally comes, and Etienne says, "I've always wanted to be a writer. Eventually, after I finish university, I'm going to get a job in the mining industry or the oil industry, something like that. I'll be sent to like the desert in Saudi Arabia. I'll work there for like a few years. Presumably, he'll get rich or at least save up a lot of money. He ends up moving back to Lebanon and living there for the rest of his days. He doesn't mention a wife or a girlfriend, but he does mention that he gets a dog, and he gets a dog when he's about 67, and then the dog dies when he's about 75, and he cries and cries and cries, and people don't understand why he's so sad. Eventually, he dies peacefully in his dream, like around 80 or something like that. And when he dies, people find his writings because he's been writing poetry the entire time, or writing books or stories, whatever. And his books end up getting published posthumously into like 6 different languages, and it's sort of like kind of the happiest ending to some degree. But what did you think about Entienne's, monologue?
Yeah, I think like the only sad part about his story was that he didn't really have someone to love except for his dog maybe. And that's why he cared about his dog so much, because we are humans and we do naturally need companions in our lives and
Mm-hmm.
things like people to share what is going on with us. And that's sort of like encoded in our nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he did that through his dog and also his writing. And yeah, it's it was interesting to find out that he was somewhat going to be famous,
Mm-hmm.
but after he died,
Yeah.
which is also a big irony. And it happens like to this day as well. Like whenever famous people die, even their records sell even more.
Mm-hmm. I think NTN is supposed to represent like the sort of hope in the Arab world that eventually, what is buried will come to light and that change will come. Because by saying that his writings will be published after he dies, he will no longer be judged by what he wrote. So he could have written a bunch of poems about how much he loves other men or something like that, right? Or how much he really hates Islam, or how much, Lebanon is a shitty country. He could have been writing all of that, but now that he's dead, there's no repercussions for it. And so there is a how can I say, a love hate relationship he probably has with his society and everything he wrote about, and maybe he put that on paper. And the hope is that one day people will be able to express those things without the repercussions. That's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
because that is kind of sad. Like for you, like you have to die in order not to be shamed by the public.
Right.
It's sort of like very sad and very ironic.
Right. It's sort of like, it's kind of strange. Like in the Middle Eastern world and in the Arab world, like there's a lot of gay or at least homoerotic like Arab poetry. And it was very interesting for me when I came to Turkey and you were telling me about some of your most famous singers, and they're like cross-dressing trans people, and I'm like, in Turkey, in Muslim Turkey, Erdogan's Turkey. You get what I'm saying? So it's interesting because like in a lot of these places, the things that's the most perverse is sometimes the thing that's celebrated, but it's only for a select few people and especially dead people. Right? If you're
Yeah,
dead, oh, they love you. Right? Go ahead.
yeah, definitely. And like, for example, that artist that cross dresses and is a trans person, like
Hmm.
she is one of the most respected singers.
Hmm.
And I guess like the only thing sort of went above that sort of judgment for people was how she conducted her art.
Hmm.
She sings so powerfully, so beautifully, and she sings arabesque, which is also like already a powerful type of music. And people looked over that.
Yeah, yeah. It's great artists have to cross genres and gender. This is something I've been thinking about.
A little bit, yeah, if you think about it.
Every great artist crosses genre and gender. Name any artist, they cross their gender sometimes and their genre.
MJ.
MJ. The only one I'm struggling with is Jay Z. But Jay Z might not be as great of an artist as I think he is because I don't think Jay Z has crossed over it fully. They just know him as Beyonce's wife.
Ha, funny. You're
No,
funny.
not Beyonce's wife, Beyonce's husband.
Oh, I thought it was a joke.
Okay, finally one joke lands, and it wasn't the one I intended.
Anyway, no, your jokes are landing. I am laughing, like, but I'm just on mute so you don't hear me.
Oh, you gotta unmute so people hear that I'm at least funny.
No, you are. But anyway, shall we continue?
Yeah, America comes up. I thought this part was interesting because English comes up too, right? Like, you know, Jean Paul is trying to get his picture taken by the sea, and he wants to post it on Instagram, and he wants an Instagram caption, and he's like, "How do I say this in English? My love for you is bigger than the sea behind me." And Etienne says something like that. Like he translates it into English, and that was pretty funny for me, the Arab English. And Adnan then starts talking about like, I'm gonna leave Lebanon one day. I have an uncle in America. He's working on my papers to try to get me over there. And I'm like, that's the story every single Arab person has. Like everybody's got an uncle in Chicago. No matter who you're talking to. Oh yeah, my cousin is in Montreal. Like everybody has somebody out there that is supposedly working on their papers. And Jean Paul hears this from Adnan, is like roasting him. Is like, you're just gonna end up working at a gas station and then marrying some ugly broad that you can't even talk to because you're too stupid to learn English. And I'm like, Jean Paul should be a comedian. Like this man is a roaster supreme. Like I would hate for Jean Paul to read me. Jesus Christ, he would tear me apart. I really would. I really would commit suicide if John Paul started going off on my ass. Jesus, he is a dog. But what did you think about that?
Yeah, we need Jean Paul to cross dress, become a drag queen, and then roast you. Because I think he would be pretty, low key. But yeah, when Etienne translated his sentence, I immediately thought of myself because I used to do that
Mhm.
for a bunch of my friends, spell check or translate, or even like just recommend popular English phrases.
Mhm.
But sorry, my cat is meowing a lot. But yeah, that's what I thought in that scene.
Okay, no comment about the uncle in America.
Yeah, I mean, I have one, not an uncle, but my mom's friend. So I can't say that's not true.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, wrapping up to the end of the movie, the guys finally make it to the whorehouse, and the Russian lady is there to greet them, and she says, it's 50,000 for each of you to see her, and Adnan is like, bet, I got it, and then she's like, it's 50,000 for the room too, and he's like, whoa, whoa, hold up, bitch, you ain't tell me that, and the guys then powwow how they're gonna pay for it, and they figure out a way. The girl comes down. Her name is Christine, very skinny, rail thin Arab girl. She looks at the boys and says, Russian lady, can I speak to you for a bit? And they go out to the side, and she's like, I told you I don't want any more kids. Like, I don't want to sleep with any more teenagers, I guess. And the Russian lady is like, they're the easiest because they come quicker than the old men do, right? And Christine is like, but I told you. And then the Russian lady starts going off on her like, I'm sick of your attitude. I'm sick of your laziness. Like, if you don't do this, I'll get another girl to do it, and I'll never call you again. And Christine starts to cry, like ugly cry, and or tries to fight back the tears. And the Russian lady's like, bitch, don't you start crying now. I'm sorry. I just love a good pimp scene. Like this Russian lady should have been in Black Dynamite among the pimps because she was hard on the bitch. And yeah, basically Christine goes upstairs to like freshen up, and then this big Arab guy like takes the boys upstairs to wait outside of the room. And as they're walking upstairs, this Arab guy gives his own monologue, and his actually wasn't that bad. It wasn't what I expected. He was like, I thank God every day I wake up. I thank God for my children. I thank God for my wife. I thank God for my life, and I'll thank God for the last time when I'm 88 years old when I die peacefully. And I was like, okay, that's strange for like the enforcer of the pimp to have like this decent home life. But what did you think about that scene?
The first thing I thought was, God damn, being a prostitute is so hard. Because like you have to have sex with any man, young, old, gross, weird, foot fetishes, pee fetishes, golden showers. It's just like a lot of shit that you have to take. And most of the time, people who come to whorehouses, they're not really people who can get like laid. So possibly they are pretty bad at this.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least like even if they're good, maybe they're just like weird or something. So it's just like such a hard work. And I just felt so bad for Christelle.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to the pusher guy, the pimp's pusher, yeah, I was thinking, because he sees what is happening around him all the time, I think he's like the most grateful one because, he could be like, I might have to like sleep with prostitutes just to get off. I might not have children, these prostitutes get abortions and all of those things. So because he knows the worst of it, he can be like easily thankful for his life.
Mm, that's a powerful point. I didn't think about that. But yeah, his proximity to the evil of this world makes him appreciate the good that's around. That's deep. That's very deep. I don't know if Christine's monologue came yet, but yeah, just seeing how Christine was, it didn't seem like she was in this life because she liked sex. It seemed like she was in it because there were no other options, and poverty had brought her in. And yeah, basically, we sort of skipped over this part earlier, but Adnan is more close to Etienne earlier, and he is like, Etienne, I'm going to find a way to make you go first because going last is going to be gross, of course. And Etienne is like, okay, all right, thank you. And then earlier in the film, Adnan tells the guys, hey, man, going first is going to be gross. She's not even going to be ready. She might not even, have cleaned up, but she'll definitely clean up after the second guy or whatever. So who wants to, who wants to go third? Third is best. She's going to be hot, ready, wanting to fuck. And the guys are like, oh no, I want to go third. No, I go third. And Etienne is just silent while the two other guys are fighting. And so then Etienne says, I guess I'll go first. So Etienne is the first to walk into the room with the prostitute, and then she tells him to like go, wash his pee pee in the sink. And as he's in the bathroom, he says, "Oh, this reminds me of Grandma's house because the tiles are the same." And Christine comes in, and Etienne's monologue is like, "I thought she was beautiful when I saw her again, and I sort of forgot that she was a prostitute." And then she started like drying my penis off like I was a child or something. It was just funny. And yeah, basically, they lay down on the bed, and Etienne is like getting head, and he is not showing any pleasure in his face at all. And as Christine is giving him head, she is like asking him, "Have you done this before?" And he lies and says, "Yeah, I did it before with a girl named Rita." And we realize it's a lie because his monologue tells us so. Then Christine lays down on the bed, and then they start to have sex. Christine makes a bunch of excruciating faces and begins to cry. And Etienne's monologue in his head is saying, like, I could tell by her face that she wasn't enjoying this and that it wasn't pleasurable or anything like that. When Etienne is a virgin and he just doesn't know that he has a very big penis and he was beating that pussy up, and that's why she was making that face. Actually, am I right or am I wrong?
You are wrong. Stop saying that.
No, Etienne is like, I feel so bad for her. She's giving herself up to me, and she wish she wasn't here. And she's like, God damn, this boy has a Coke bottle. I swear to God.
Stop. Stop thinking about his penis. Let's
That's
get
the,
to the
that's
story.
that's not a crying face. That's Jesus. That's a big dick face that she was
No,
making.
no, no. Stop it. Stop it.
Am I, as a man with a decent sized penis, like I know that face. That is not. I'm sorry,
You
actually.
are
Go
fucked
ahead.
up. Stop.
How am I fucked up? That's oh my God. Go ahead. Go ahead.
She obviously did not want it to do that. So that was not a pleasure face.
Yeah, I don't want. I'm sure you don't want 14 inches either.
It was not 14 inches. Stop it.
You don't want nothing the size of a blender going up in your cervix.
No, you don't. You don't.
Exactly, and that's what was hitting her. Jesus Christ! Imagine the
Stop.
pain.
That's so gross. Stop it.
Man, go ahead.
Anyway, yeah, that scene was definitely like one of the most, I guess, enchanting and emotional scenes because you can feel the uncomfortableness of the whole thing. Like you feel uncomfortable for Etienne, you feel uncomfortable for the prostitute. And I also was thinking like, I just imagined if I was in his shoes, and if I was like, if it was normal for me to go to a prostitute when I was like 18 or something like that, and I just went in there, the guy told me to like clean up, and then like ate me out, and it was like the first time, and then we had sex, and he wasn't happy about it. Like, this is not something that you would want sex to be. This is
Mm-hmm.
like very traumatizing. You would want sex to be with someone enjoyable at the very least,
Mm-hmm.
and or someone like you would want sex to be consensual, like
Mm-hmm.
emotionally. So yeah, this is so bad, so bad.
Yeah. Um, it is, it is. Like, you can tell Etienne was like peer pressured into this, and this is, I think, going back to the main theme of this film, that Etienne probably was just going along for the ride, and as a man, he is expected to want to have sex. He's expected to be just horny as hell and wanting to bust nuts, but he, is in a situation where all the guys around him are making him go into this room, right? And he can't protest. He can't run out scared. He can't run out and say no. He has to go through with it, right?
Yeah,
It's
and
like a rite of passage. He doesn't want to walk through. Go ahead.
yeah, and like for Etienne, it wasn't like that because we know of his life story, but maybe it was also. But if you think about like how in reality things happen, this is like very real. It looks very real, and this is something that might have happened many, many times in most countries, such as Turkey or Lebanon. And then these young boys think sex is this.
Right.
Think
I mean,
that sex is somewhat forced, and woman is not supposed to enjoy it that much,
right.
and it's sort of like just something to show, I don't know, like masculinity and power.
I mean, when we think back on Etienne's monologue on how his life went and ended, he never mentions a female or having a partner because he probably was so traumatized by the sexual experience. And it's not the fact that his body was violated. It felt like his body was used as something to hurt somebody else. So he could never probably lay down with another woman and not think about Christine, how he called her a whore, how he lied to her. And maybe he's associating all of those negative things with sex in and of itself.
Definitely, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. Christine also gives like her monologue because while they're having sex, I guess the scene sort of fades. No, no, no. Something about the condom coming off. Okay. I didn't understand this part, and maybe you can build on this. You know, Etienne narrates that the condom came off, she took the condom off, and then he came. But I don't know if he came in her, if they were still having sex. Can
No,
you yeah.
so this is what happened. He gave him head, and then he got on top of her. They started having sex, but because it was so uncomfortable for both of them, but I guess for Etienne, he wasn't hard enough. Like, he wasn't hard anymore.
Hmm.
So then she took off the condom and gave him a hand job, and that's when he came.
I
That's how he
see.
came.
I see. I didn't see that part.
They
Or
they don't show it to us, but
they
he
don't
just
show.
says it.
I
He
see. I
he
see.
says, "I felt her hand, and then I came."
I see. Low key, I have to say this. The monologues really, started to get to me at some point. Um, because at that point in the film, I was like, can y'all please just stop talking and like not fuck, but can you at least get to the point, like get to the next thing that will happen from this? And there was just too much talking at that point for me. That took me out of it. Maybe that's why I wasn't following it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the last monologue was a bit long
Hmm.
because the only thing also we saw was the sea as well.
Hmm.
So that was like a good 10, 15-minute monologue at the end.
Hmm.
And I was starting to feel sleepy, especially because I was also watching early in the morning as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so the last monologue is like, Etienne is like drowning, and we're back in the water of the ocean. And then Christine gives her monologue where she says basically, I tried to take my own life one time, but I didn't succeed. And eventually I will get out of this lifestyle of prostitution. And then years later, I will take off this invisible noose around my neck and no longer feel guilty. And then I'll finally be free from all of these negative emotions I have. And the end of the film is Etienne coming back to his mother's house. And he says hi to his mom. Mom says, "You want to eat, baby?" And Etienne says, "No, he doesn't want to eat." And yeah, that's pretty much it. He goes to sleep, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There is also a powerful shot where Etienne comes out of the room and the guys are like, "How did it go?" And he's like, "It went great." And he like daps him up, but he looks very sad and he like holds on to the wall in a cross shape with his arms outstretched. Very powerful image. But yeah, any comments on the ending?
No, I mean, it was as poetic as how it began.
Mm-hmm.
And you can definitely like, I felt like a sinking in my, chest and in my body, that I felt like sort of Etienne's trauma. And I was thinking like, how the fuck is he going to get over this now?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, what is going to happen? Because obviously this is not something they can talk with his friend group.
Mm-hmm.
And we see their last conversation as well as they're walking towards the house, and everyone is like joking, and the guy, what was his name, John Paul, was saying
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I fucked her so good that he wanted a second round.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like, I don't know, like, it's not something that you talk with your friend group as well.
Right.
So it's just some trauma that he has to live with and keep it inside of him.
Right, right, right. I mean, yeah, John Paul is traumatized because going after Etienne, it's like he threw a hot dog down a hallway because he just rammed all up in Christine. I mean, every time he gets pussy for the rest of his life, John Paul is thinking, ain't it supposed to be deeper?
Stop it. Stop.
I'm serious. I'm serious. But yeah, this is a film that I did not expect to. Well, I did not expect to not like some parts of it, right? Because generally, I really like Arab films because they show me a totally different side of the world, and the questions that the Arabs ask themselves in their own medium are very interesting to me. Like, how do we deal with so much sexism in our society? How do you deal with a society that's so much influenced by religion? How do you navigate world as a man trying to be a human being with all these other social pressures on them? Those are very interesting questions for me. It's just I feel like this film wanted to try to answer me too much. Like it gave me a very long-winded answer by adding so much monologue and dialogue. And I love monologue. I love dialogue. I hate silent films. I love when people are talking. But this one I feel like went a bit too far sometimes.
Okay, so what is your final score?
Mm, I'm giving it a solid 7. Solid 7.
Okay, that is also my score as well.
Hmm.
For me, this movie was very relatable since
Hmm.
I'm Turkish and we pretty much deal with the same sort of toxic stuff or same sort of life struggles, oppressed homosexuality, oppressed sexuality, and all sorts of things that they were trying to like highlight in this movie. And just in a sense that saying they exist and they do put certain chains on us.
Hmm.
So I thought like those bits were just like very relatable for me. I
Hmm.
didn't mind the monologues really. I just thought like the last one was a bit long, but other than that, I was sort of excited to hear them throughout
Yeah.
the movie. So for me, they were okay.
Hmm.
And yeah, everything just felt very like authentic, philosophical, and I like the questions that it asked. There are a lot of movies about toxic masculinity, but there aren't enough movies about how toxic masculinity and oppressed sexuality is like harmful for men
Hmm.
specifically. And that's also something I liked about the director's approach and thought.
Yeah. And going into this film, I didn't know it was going to be about masculinity in that way. I low key thought it might be a comedy or a dramedy or something like that. But no, it's a very serious film, and it does make you think. And for the rest of the day, I'm doing my inner monologues. So, would you
Yeah,
recommend this film?
yeah, I would definitely. I think it's easy to watch, enjoyable, and yeah, it makes you think of yourself, even if you don't think about the bigger philosophical questions.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think there's something to gain from this movie.
All right. FMK from the friend group.
Ew,
FMK BFF.
BFF.
Yeah, like because there's four guys, so there's like a
Oh,
best friend, and then F Mary Kill.
okay. I would marry Etienne
Okay.
because I think at the very least he's philosophical, he's good-hearted, and
Hmm.
maybe he's asexual, and I can live with that. And sorry, but I would kill probably Jean Paul, or no, 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 not kill Jean Paul, kill Adnan,
Wow.
and fuck the other guy that did not talk, Dan Burak,
Okay.
and then friend Jean Paul because he's such a troll.
Okay. He's a good like attack dog whenever you need somebody red
Yeah.
for the filth. Yeah, get him, John Paul.
Okay, a question for you. Who would you like to smoke weed with?
uh, man, damn, I want to say John Paul because he's hilarious, but he's also racist.
Yeah.
And Adnan is gonna be like trying to flex that he's like the biggest gangster around. Etienne is gonna make me depressed. Maybe green shirt guy because he won't say anything. We're just gonna smoke and be like, all right, yeah, yeah. It might be awkward silence, but at least it's like a good high. Like I'm not over here thinking about that.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. By the way, shout out to my guy Matt Villani. He left a comment saying depression can fly under the radar. Even a trained professional might not know. What do you think?
That's very true. Very
Hmm.
true.
Yep, yep, yep. And yeah, as far as recommending this film, I can't say I would recommend this to everybody, but definitely somebody who's familiar with that culture would definitely love this film. So like if I meet any people from like Turkey or the Middle East, they would appreciate the nuances of this film, especially an Arab person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're Turkish and if you like Nuri Bilge Ceylan's movies, I think you will like this. For example, it's much
Hmm.
lighter
Hmm.
and different perspective, different culture, of course,
Yeah,
but something relatable at the same time.
yeah. A bit pretentious and melodramatic, though, in my opinion. Like I could easily see people watching this film and rolling their eyes, like, "Oh God." Again, I can see some people being frustrated with it.
Okay. I mean, I didn't think that, but yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. Anything else?
No,
Had you ever seen a Lebanese movie before?
this is my first time.
Really? There's a really good one called Big Shot. Really good. Really good.
Okay.
Lebanese films are generally really good.
Well, maybe we can review that later.
All right. But this has been episode 56 of Simon and Acting Movie Reviews, Death of a Virgin and the Sin of Not Living. Shout out to everybody who tuned in and subscribe to my channel, Simon Hill Keeps It Trill. Subscribe on Spotify, Cinema Crossroads. Send movie requests if you want us to talk about a certain film. Just put it in the comments. Be easy out there and peace.